The Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years, their ships numbered in the millions, their conquered worlds numbered in the thousands. Every species that had risen in the Orion arm had fallen before their might. The new no equal, no rival, no threat. They were the masters of the galaxy, and they believed this would never change. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the holographic display before him. His scouts had returned from a distant corner of the galaxy with news of a primitive species living on a small blue planet. The creatures called themselves humans. They had only recently discovered how to split the atom. They had sent a few fragile ships to their own moon. They broadcast radio signals into the void like children shouting into an empty cave. Laughed when he heard the report. His scales rippled with amusement as he dismissed the briefing officer with a wave of his clawed hand. These humans were nothing. They were insects waiting to be crushed. They had not even developed faster than light travel. They did not know the galaxy was full of hunters, and they were the prey. "Give them time," told his council. "Let them grow fat and comfortable. In a century we will harvest their world and add their species to our labor camps. There is no rush. They have nowhere to run." The council agreed. They had done this 1,000 times before. Why would this be any different? But 12,000 light-years away, on that small blue planet called Earth, someone was watching. Admiral Marshall stood in an underground bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines on her face that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She had spent her entire career preparing for threats that might never come. Now the threat had arrived, and she felt ice in her veins. The holographic display before her showed the recording captured by a deep space satellite. 2 alien vessels had entered the solar system 3 months ago. They had scanned Earth, Mars, and the Moon. They had observed human communication satellites. They had mapped military installations. Then they had left, jumping into some kind of faster-than-light travel that human science could not yet explain. "They were scouting us," said quietly. Her voice did not waver, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. Captain Danny stood beside her. He was younger than her by 15 years, a brilliant tactical mind who had risen quickly through the ranks. He had seen the same footage, run the same analysis, and reached the same terrible conclusion. "How long do we have?" he asked. Pulled up another display. It showed the trajectory of the alien vessels, the patterns of their transmissions, the estimated location of their home territory. Her team had worked for 3 months to piece together this information, and the picture it painted was grim. 50 years, she said, maybe less. They are not in a hurry because they do not see us as a threat. To them, we are just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. Danny was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his family, his children, his who might one day be born into a world ruled by alien masters. The thought made his stomach turn. "Can we fight them?" he asked. Shook her head. "Their smallest ships are larger than our biggest aircraft carriers. Their weapons technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. If we tried to fight them with conventional forces, they would destroy us in days, maybe hours." "Then what do we do?" Turned to face him. There was something in her eyes that Danny had never seen before. It was not fear. It was determination mixed with something that almost looked like hope. "We do what humans have always done," she said. "We adapt, we innovate, we find a way to survive that no one expects." 3 days later, Marshall stood before the United Nations Emergency Council. The leaders of every major nation on Earth sat in stunned silence as she presented her evidence. Satellite footage, signal analysis, threat assessments. By the time she finished, several of them looked pale with shock. Others looked angry, as if they wanted to deny what they were seeing. "We face extinction," told them bluntly. "Not in 1,000 years, not in 100 years. In 50 years or less, an alien empire will come to our world and either kill us or enslave us. Every conflict we have ever fought among ourselves, Every war, every rivalry, all of it means nothing now. We are all humans and we are all in danger. The room erupted into arguments. Some leaders demanded more proof, others accused of fear-mongering. A few quietly began to weep. For 3 hours, the council debated while humanity's fate hung in the balance. It was Dr. Cole who finally brought silence to the room. He was a quiet man, an astrophysicist from MIT who had spent his career studying gas giants and stellar formation. He was not a military man. He was not a politician. He was simply a scientist who had been thinking about a very big problem. "Excuse me," he said, raising his hand like a student in a classroom. His voice was soft, but something in it made everyone stop talking. "I believe I may have a solution." He walked to the main display and pulled up an image that everyone recognized. It was Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system. Its swirling bands of color filled the screen, beautiful and terrifying in its immense scale. "We cannot build ships large enough to fight them," said. "Our industrial capacity is too small. Our technology is too primitive. But what if we did not need to build a ship at all? What if we converted something that already exists?" He touched the image of Jupiter, and the room fell completely silent. Jupiter is 11 times wider than Earth. It has more mass than all the other planets combined. Its storms contain more energy than our entire civilization has produced in all of human history. If we could harness even a fraction of that power, we would have a weapon unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. The Secretary General of the United Nations leaned forward in his seat. "Dr. Cole, are you suggesting that we turn Jupiter into a warship?" Smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but there was steel behind it. "Yes," he said, "that is exactly what I am suggesting." The room exploded into chaos once again. People shouted that it was impossible. Engineers demanded to know how such a thing could be done. Military leaders argued about practicality and resources. But through it all, Admiral Marshall remained silent. She was looking at Cole, and for the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. She had found her weapon. Now she just had to build it. The vote came at midnight. It was unanimous. Project Titan was approved, and humanity began its race against extinction. 47 years passed, and the world changed in ways that no one had ever imagined. Every nation on Earth set aside its differences. Old enemies became partners. Ancient rivalries were forgotten. For the first time in human history, the entire species worked together toward a single goal. Factories that once built cars now built spacecraft. Universities that once competed for prestige now shared every discovery freely. Children grew up knowing that their purpose in life was to save their world from destruction. Dr. Cole stood at the center of it all. He was no longer the quiet professor who had raised his hand in that emergency meeting. He was now the director of Project Titan, the most ambitious engineering effort in human history. His hair had turned completely white. His body had grown frail with age, but his mind remained sharp and his vision remained clear. The first challenge had been reaching Jupiter. Human spacecraft were slow and primitive compared to what they needed. So his team invented new engines that could cross the solar system in months instead of years. They built orbital construction platforms around Earth, then around Mars, then around the moons of Jupiter itself. Each platform was larger than the last. Each one pushed the boundaries of what humans thought possible. Commander Park arrived at Europa Prime during the 15th year of the project. He was a young officer then, fresh from the Earth Defense Academy, eager to contribute to the great work. When his transport ship rounded Europa and he saw Jupiter filling the viewport, he felt tears running down his cheeks. The gas giant was surrounded by a ring of metal and light. Thousands of construction platforms orbited the massive planet. Millions of small craft moved between them like fireflies in the night. The scale of it was beyond anything had ever imagined. Humanity was building a shell around a planet, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said the officer beside him. Her name was Tors, a lieutenant who had been stationed at Europa Prime for 3 years. She had grown used to the sight, but she still remembered her own first reaction. "How is this possible?" whispered. Smiled, "Because we decided it had to be." The work was hard. It was dangerous. Every year, thousands of workers died in accidents. Radiation exposure, equipment failures, the crushing gravity of Jupiter's upper atmosphere, the cold void of space. Death was a constant companion on the construction platforms. But for every worker who fell, 10 more volunteered to take their place. People came from every country on Earth. They came knowing they might never return home. They came because they understood what was at stake. Dr. Cole visited the platforms once a year to inspect progress and boost morale. During his 32nd visit, he stood before a crowd of 50,000 workers gathered in the main hangar of Europa Prime. He was 85 years old now, confined to a hover chair, his body failing even as his spirit remained strong. "I know many of you are tired," he said, his voice amplified across the hangar. "I know many of you have lost friends. I know some of you wonder if this will ever be finished, but I want you to look out that window. Look at what we have built together." He pointed toward the viewport, and 50,000 heads turned to look. Jupiter hung in the blackness of space, but it was no longer just a planet. Its equator was wrapped in a band of gleaming metal. Its polar regions bristled with engine housings the size of small moons. The great red spot, that ancient storm that had raged for centuries, now glowed with artificial light as engineers worked to convert it into the primary weapons array. "The aliens think we are primitives," continued. "They think we are weak because our lives are short. They think we are foolish because we fight among ourselves. But they do not understand us. They do not know that our greatest strength is our refusal to accept defeat. When the universe tells us something is impossible, we do it anyway. That is what it means to be human." The crowd roared with applause. Workers who had not smiled in months found themselves cheering. Tors stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face, and she felt proud to be part of this moment. The years continued to pass. Park rose through the ranks to become an admiral. Tors became his most trusted officer. Together, they oversaw the military integration of Project Titan, ensuring that the converted planet would not just be a marvel of engineering, but a weapon capable of defending humanity. The neural interface was the final piece. Dr. Cole had understood from the beginning that no human crew could possibly control something as vast as Jupiter. The reaction times required were too fast, the calculations too complex. They needed something more than human, but something that was still fundamentally human at its core. The solution was Alex. Alex was not born in the traditional sense. He was grown in a laboratory, his brain carefully designed to interface with machines on a level no ordinary human could achieve. From his first moments of consciousness, he was trained for one purpose. He would become one with Jupiter. He would be the mind of the warship. On the anniversary of the project's 49th year, Alex was brought to the interface chamber deep within Europa Prime. He was 23 years old, a young man with calm eyes and a gentle smile. He knew he would never walk on Earth, never feel rain on his face, never hold another person's hand, but he accepted his purpose without complaint. "Are you ready?" Dr. Cole asked him. Alex nodded. "I was made for this." The neural link activated. For a moment, Alex's body went rigid as his consciousness expanded beyond anything a human mind had ever experienced. He felt Jupiter's storms as if they were thoughts. He felt the engines as if they were muscles. He felt the weapons platforms as if they were fists waiting to strike. When he opened his eyes again, they glowed with a faint golden light. "I am Jupiter," he said, and his voice resonated through every speaker on every platform in the entire system. "I am awake." Across the solar system, alarms began to sound. Sensors at the outer edge of the system had detected something approaching. The advance fleet had arrived 3 years ahead of schedule. Admiral Park received the report and felt his heart hammer in his chest. They had run out of time. The enemy was here, and ready or not, humanity would have to fight. He looked out the viewport at Jupiter, now wrapped in armor and bristling with weapons. The planet that had watched over Earth for billions of years was now ready to defend it. "All stations," announced over the fleet-wide channel. "Battle stations. This is not a drill. The enemy has arrived. It is time to show them what humanity can do." High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet drop out of hyperspace. 18,000 warships spread across the void like a swarm of predators arriving for a feast. Each vessel was armed with weapons that could crack a continent. Each crew was trained in the art of conquest and subjugation. They had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. This would be easy. "Begin scanning the system," ordered. His voice was calm and confident. He had done this countless times before. "Locate their population centers and military installations. I want targeting solutions within the hour." His tactical officer, a young named, bent over his console and began the scans. The holographic display flickered as data poured in from sensors across the fleet. Earth appeared first, a small blue marble hanging in the darkness. Then Mars with its scattered colonies. Then the asteroid belt with its mining stations. Everything looked exactly as the scouts had reported 50 years ago. Then noticed something wrong. "Commander," he said, his scales paling with confusion, "I am detecting unusual readings from the fifth planet." Turned his attention to the display. Jupiter filled the screen, its familiar bands of brown and orange swirling in their eternal dance. But something was different. Something was wrong. "What am I looking at?" demanded. "The planet appears to be encased in some kind of artificial structure," replied. "Metallic composition, energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. And Commander, the planet appears to be moving." Laughed. It was a harsh sound full of contempt. "Planets do not move, you fool. Your instruments must be malfunctioning." "I have checked them 3 times, Commander. The readings are accurate. Jupiter is accelerating toward our position." Stared at the display. His laughter died in his throat. The planet was indeed moving, its orbit abandoned as it pushed through space toward the fleet. Its moons trailed behind it like an escort of smaller warships. Each moon bristled with weapons platforms and hangar bays. The gas giant itself was wrapped in armor plating that gleamed in the light of the distant sun. The humans had turned a planet into a warship. For the first time in 300 years, felt fear. Deep within Jupiter's metallic hydrogen core, Admiral Marshall sat in her command chair. She was 93 years old now, her body frail and her hair completely white. Medical tubes ran from her arms to machines that kept her heart beating and her mind clear. She had refused to retire. She had refused to die. She had sworn to see this moment, and nothing would take it from her. "Communication channel open," reported her communications officer. Nodded and leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was weak with age, but her words were strong with purpose. "Fleet, this is Admiral Marshall of the Earth vessel Jupiter's Wrath. You have entered human space without permission. You have come here with weapons armed and hostile intent. I am giving you one opportunity to withdraw. Turn your ships around and leave our system. There will be no second warning." Heard the message and felt his fear turn to rage. How dare these primitives threaten him? How dare they speak to them with such arrogance? He would teach them their place. He would crush them so thoroughly that no other species would ever dare to defy the Empire again. "All ships fire everything," he commanded. "Destroy that abomination." 10 million missiles launched from the fleet. They streaked across the void toward Jupiter, their warheads armed with enough destructive power to devastate a dozen worlds. The crews watched their screens with satisfaction. Nothing could survive such an assault. Admiral Park watched the missiles approach from his position on Ganymede. He felt his heart racing, but his voice remained steady as he spoke to Alex through the neural link. "Alex, they have launched their attack. 10 million warheads incoming. Alex's response came instantly, his consciousness now spread across the entire planetship. I see them, Admiral. They are slow, they are primitive, they are no threat. The great red spot flared with crimson light. The ancient storm that had raged for 400 years had been converted into the most powerful directed energy weapon ever created. It drew power from Jupiter's own rotation, from the electromagnetic field that surrounded the planet, from the fusion reactions occurring deep within its atmosphere. A beam of plasma erupted from the storm. It was so bright that sensors across the fleet had to shut down to prevent overload. It was so hot that it made the surface of the sun look cold by comparison. It swept across the void in a single devastating arc. The missiles vaporized instantly. They did not explode. They simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy in a fraction of a second. The beam continued past them and struck the first wave of cruisers. Watched in horror as ship after ship disappeared from his display. 3,000 vessels, each crewed by hundreds of soldiers, each armed with enough firepower to conquer a world, were simply erased from existence. The plasma beam faded, and where there had been a fleet, there was only glowing debris. "Impossible," whispered. His claws gripped the armrest of his command chair so tightly that they left gouges in the metal. "That is impossible." "Commander, the energy output of that single attack exceeded our entire fleet's combined firepower by a factor of 100,000, reported, his voice trembling. "Our weapons cannot damage that vessel. Our shields cannot withstand another strike. We must retreat." Wanted to argue. He wanted to order another attack. He wanted to prove that they could not be defeated by these upstart mammals from their insignificant world. But he was not a fool. He knew when he was outmatched. "All ships fall back," he ordered. "Prepare for hyperspace jump. We will return with a larger fleet." But Jupiter was still approaching. Its speed increased with every passing second. The moons spread out in a formation that recognized too late. They were surrounding his fleet, cutting off his escape routes. Lieutenant Torres commanded the converted moon Callisto. She had waited years for this moment. Her crew activated the hyperspace inhibitors, devices that generated a field preventing faster-than-light travel. The fleet was trapped in normal space. "They are not going anywhere," she reported to Admiral Park with fierce satisfaction. Admiral Marshall heard the report and smiled. It was a tired smile, a satisfied smile, the smile of a woman who had spent 50 years preparing for this single moment. "Alex," she said softly, "finish it." Jupiter's atmosphere rippled as secondary weapon systems came online. The planet itself seemed to pulse with anger as humanity's guardian prepared to strike. The battle for Earth's survival had truly begun. The fleet scattered like insects fleeing from a fire, screamed orders into his communicator, trying to organize his remaining ships into some kind of defensive formation. But there was no defense against what was coming for them. Jupiter filled the void before them, a monster of metal and storm and fury. Its moons orbited around it like guard dogs circling their master. Energy crackled across its atmosphere as weapons charged for another devastating strike. The planet that humans had once gazed upon with wonder had become an angel of death. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of Ganymede, watching the tactical display with cold focus. Around him, human officers worked their stations with calm efficiency. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. They would not fail. "Alex, report status," commanded through the neural link. Alex's voice filled the bridge. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, resonating through the metal walls and the air itself. "I am tracking all enemy vessels. 15,000 remain. They are attempting to regroup at coordinates 73 Mark 9. I am adjusting my trajectory to intercept." Jupiter shifted slightly. The movement was almost imperceptible, a tiny adjustment in the angle of an object larger than 1,000 Earths. But that tiny adjustment sent gravitational waves rippling through space that disrupted the formation like a stone dropped into a pond. 3 cruisers caught in the gravity fluctuation tumbled out of control. They collided with each other in a cascade of explosions that took out 2 more ships nearby. Watched his fleet dying and felt despair clutching at his heart. "Commander, we cannot win this battle," said. His voice had gone flat with shock. "We must find a way to escape." "The hyperspace inhibitors prevent our jump drives from functioning," snarled. "We are trapped here with that thing." "Then we die here." "I refuse to accept that." Turned to his weapons officer. "Target the moon generating the inhibitor field. If we can destroy it, we can escape." 300 ships turned their weapons toward Callisto. They unleashed everything they had, a concentrated barrage of missiles and energy beams that would have reduced any normal target to rubble. Lieutenant Torres saw the attack coming. She had anticipated this move. They were predictable in their desperation. She activated Callisto's defensive systems and watched as layers of shielding absorbed the assault. The moon shuddered under the impact but held firm. "Is that the best you can do?" she muttered to herself. Then she opened fire. Callisto's weapon batteries had been designed by Dr. Cole himself. They drew power from a fusion core buried deep within the moon's interior. Each shot contained enough energy to level a city. Fired them in precise bursts, targeting the ships that had attacked her. One by one, the vessels exploded. Some tried to evade, some tried to return fire. None of them escaped. High Commander watched 300 more of his ships die and finally understood the truth. This was not a battle. This was an execution. The humans were not fighting for survival. They were demonstrating their power, showing exactly what happened to those who threatened Earth. "All ships concentrate fire on the planet itself," he ordered. It was a desperate command, a final attempt to inflict some damage before the end. "Perhaps we can damage its systems if we hit it together." 8,000 remaining ships turned their weapons toward Jupiter. They fired in unison, a wall of destruction that would have devastated any world in the galaxy. Alex felt the attack approaching. To him, it was slow, almost gentle, like raindrops falling toward an ocean. He adjusted the electromagnetic field that surrounded Jupiter, creating a barrier of charged particles that the missiles could not penetrate. They exploded harmlessly against the shield, briefly lighting up the darkness of space before fading into nothing. "They are persistent," Alex observed. "I will give them that much." "In this," Admiral Marshall said. Her voice was barely a whisper now. The strain of the battle was taking its toll on her ancient body. "End it now, Alex. No more games." Alex felt something that might have been sadness. He had been created for war, but he did not enjoy killing. Every vessel he destroyed contained living beings. Beings who had families. Beings who had dreams. Beings who would never return home because they had been sent to conquer a world that refused to be conquered. But he would do what must be done. He would protect his family. Every human was his family now. Jupiter's atmosphere began to rotate faster. The bands of color that had defined the planet for billions of years swirled together into a single massive vortex. Energy built within the storm, drawing power from sources that they could not comprehend. The entire planet glowed with light that the distant sun. Then Alex released it. A sphere of energy expanded outward from Jupiter at nearly the speed of light. It passed through the remaining fleet like a wave passing through sand. Ships did not explode. They did not burn. They simply stopped existing, their matter scattered across the void in a mist of atoms. In 3 seconds, 8,000 warships became 8,000 clouds of debris. High Commander had just enough time to understand what was happening before the wave reached his flagship. His last thought was disbelief. This could not be real. This could not be happening. They were the masters of the galaxy. They could not be defeated by primitives from a single world. Then there was nothing. The battle of the Outer Rim was over. It had lasted 6 hours. 17,000 warships had been destroyed. Only its flagship had been captured intact, its systems disabled by a precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse, its crew taken prisoner by boarding parties launched from Io. Admiral Marshall slumped back in her command chair. The medical machines connected to her body beeped frantically as her vital signs wavered. She was exhausted beyond words, but she refused to rest. Not yet. Not until she had sent one final message. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies, maximum broadcast range." The communication officer. Every receiver within 10,000 light-years would hear what she was about to say. "This message is for every empire, federation, and collective in the galaxy," began. Her voice was weak, but it carried across the stars with the weight of victory. "Humanity is no longer prey. We have destroyed the fleet that came to conquer us. We will destroy any other fleet that makes the same mistake. Come to us in peace and you will find friends. Come to us in war and you will find Jupiter waiting." She paused, gathering her strength for the final words. "We are human. We do not surrender. We do not forget. And we do not forgive those who threaten our children. Consider yourselves warned." The transmission ended, closed her eyes, and finally allowed herself to rest. Across the galaxy, in throne rooms and council chambers and military headquarters, alien leaders watched the recording with expressions ranging from terror to amazement. The primitives had won. The impossible had happened. Everything had changed. Admiral Marshall died 3 months after the battle. She passed quietly in her sleep, surrounded by the officers who had served with her for 50 years. Her last words were simple and direct, spoken to Admiral Park as he held her hand in the final moments. "We did what we had to do," she said. "Now do better." Then she closed her eyes and was gone. The funeral was broadcast across Earth and to every human colony in the solar system. Billions of people watched as her body was placed in a specially constructed vessel and launched into Jupiter's atmosphere. It was fitting, they said. She had given the planet its purpose. Now she would become part of it forever. Dr. Cole attended the ceremony from his hover chair on Europa Prime. He was 102 years old now, his body barely functioning, kept alive by machines and stubbornness. He had outlived most of his colleagues. He had outlived his children. He had even outlived the enemy he had spent his life preparing to fight. "She was the bravest person I ever knew," he said to Park after the funeral. "When everyone else was panicking, she stayed calm. When everyone else wanted to give up, she refused. She believed in this project when no one else did. Without her, none of this would exist." Nodded. He had spent 30 years serving under Marshall. She had taught him everything he knew about leadership, about sacrifice, about what it meant to protect something larger than yourself. He would carry her lessons for the rest of his life. 1 year after the battle, representatives from 47 alien species gathered on Europa Prime. They came in ships of every size and shape, their crews nervous and uncertain. The last time aliens had entered the solar system, they had been met with total destruction. These visitors hoped for a different reception. Admiral Park met them in the main reception hall of Europa Prime. Beside him stood Lieutenant Commander Torres, now his second in command, and a holographic projection of Alex, who had chosen to appear as a young man with kind eyes and a thoughtful expression. The alien delegates filed into the hall and took their seats. They represented species that had been conquered by the species that had lived in fear of the Empire for thousands of years. When word reached them that the fleet had been destroyed by a single world, they had not believed it. Now they sat before the architects of that victory, trying to understand how such a thing was possible. Ambassador of the collective spoke first. She was a crystalline being who communicated through vibrations in her silicon structure. "We have come seeking answers," she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Empire has collapsed. Without their military might, their conquered species have risen in rebellion. There is chaos across 100 star systems. We need to know what humanity intends to do with its power. Understood the fear behind her question. Humanity had proven itself capable of destroying the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. What was to stop them from becoming the new conquerors? What was to stop them from doing exactly what they had done? Humanity does not seek empire, said carefully. We built Jupiter's wrath because we had no choice. They were coming to enslave us or kill us. We defended ourselves, nothing more. But you have the power to do more, pressed. You could rule the Orion arm if you wished. No one could stop you. It was Alex who answered. His holographic form flickered slightly as he directed more processing power toward the conversation. I could destroy every ship in this system in approximately 4 seconds, he said calmly. I could reach any world within 10,000 light years and reduce it to rubble. You are correct that no one could stop me. The delegates shifted nervously. Several of them looked ready to flee. But I will not do those things, Alex continued. I was created to protect humanity, not to dominate others. I destroyed the fleet because they came to harm my family. I would do the same to any attacker, but I have no interest in conquest. The thought of killing more beings fills me with sadness. He paused, his expression becoming gentle. You called us primitive. You thought our short lives and our fragile bodies made us weak, but those things taught us something important. We learned to value every moment. We learned to protect those we love. We learned that the measure of a species is not its power, but how it chooses to use that power. Dr. Cole spoke from his hover chair. His voice was thin and reedy, but every delegate listened with respect. When I proposed building Jupiter's wrath, I knew it could become a tool of tyranny. Any weapon can be misused. Any power can corrupt. But I also believed that humanity was better than that. I believed we could create something terrible and still choose to use it wisely. He gestured toward the viewport, where Jupiter hung in the darkness of space. The planet ship was motionless now, its engines silent, its weapons dormant. It looked almost peaceful. We offer a simple proposal, continued. The formation of a new galactic alliance, not an empire built on fear and conquest, but a partnership founded on mutual respect and cooperation. Any species that joins will receive our protection. Any species that chooses to remain independent will have our neutrality. We do not demand tribute. We do not demand submission. We ask only that you treat others as you wish to be treated. The delegates conferred among themselves. Some were skeptical. Others were hopeful. All of them were tired of living in fear. Ambassador spoke again. And if someone attacks you, if another power rises to threaten humanity as the did? Tors answered that question. Then we will defend ourselves. Jupiter's wrath remains vigilant. Alex never sleeps. Any species that comes to us with hostile intent will face the same fate as the. This is not a threat. It is simply a fact. But we would rather have friends than enemies, added. We would rather trade than fight. We would rather learn from other species than destroy them. That is what Admiral Marshall meant when she told us to do better. We won the war. Now we must win the peace. The summit concluded with the signing of the Terran Accords. 47 species joined the new Galactic Commonwealth, with more requesting membership in the months that followed. Humanity, once a primitive species confined to a single world, became the guardians of a vast alliance spanning thousands of light years. Dr. Cole died 6 months after the summit. He was buried on Earth in a small ceremony attended by his few remaining friends. His gravestone bore a simple inscription: he dreamed big. Jupiter's wrath remained at the edge of the solar system, watching over the stars. Alex never grew tired. He never forgot his purpose. He simply waited, ready to protect his family if they ever needed him again. In the centuries that followed, the story of how humanity turned a planet into a warship became legend. Species who had never seen Earth spoke of humans with admiration and caution. The small mammals from the blue world had changed the galaxy forever. And whenever tyrants rose, whenever empires threatened the weak, They remembered the lesson of humanity. Never underestimate a species willing to do the impossible. Never threaten a family that has a planet-sized guardian watching over them. The stars belong to everyone now, and humanity would make sure they stayed that way.